Hey everyone, and welcome to my Procreate demo for the piece I call The Corpse Collector. So this is a follow-up to the last one I did, where I had a sort of armored fighter type guy in this gothic town, sort of this dark heavy thing. This sort of is going along with that idea, perhaps another character in that world. I think you can see where where this guy might be able to play some sort of a role in that whole thing. When I started this piece, I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. I just knew that I wanted the next character that was going to be a part of it to be just something really like sort of dark and twisted. Obviously, it's not twisted like, you know, the cover to a Cannibal Corpse record or something, but it's twisted in the sense of he's kind of disgusting and has these sort of insidious function, I guess you could say. So we don't exactly know what he would do. Is he somebody that you trade with? Is he somebody who fights alongside you? Is he somebody you fight against? It doesn't really matter. It's more just about me continuing to try and set the tone for this world. So I knew that I wanted him to have just sort of like this big dark cloak, and I wanted him to have some sort of a staff. You can see a staff and a lantern, and then he's sort of hunched over. At this point in my mind, he was more just sort of a, I guess you could say, like a standard necromancer, or maybe even like a wandering, just creepy dude that maybe you have to talk to or something like that. And then as time went on, I started trying to figure out like ways to flesh him out a little bit more. Oh, no pun intended, I guess. Flesh him out. Anywho, so right now this is a pretty long drawing process on this one. There was a lot to do. As far as line art, you'll see some of the process. In this, I'm using my fat pencil, which is linked below if you want to see how I made that. Another interesting point about this piece is this is the first piece of art I did that actually spans my old iPad and my new iPad. So when I started this, I started it on my iPad Pro 12.9 inch first generation, and then around, I don't know, I want to say maybe like this point in the drawing or so, not too far in, I switched to the new iPad Pro, the iPad Pro 12.9 inch second generation, and that's where the rest of the illustration was done on. That also means this is the first time I'm editing video and doing recording and all of that process on the new iPad Pro. So all in all, I'm sure a lot of people out there are wondering, well, first, if I bought one and what I thought about it and all that. Since I've been really putting a lot of work in the last couple of years into Procreate and all that, I absolutely bought one so that I could make sure that I was keeping up to date with everything. I love it. All of the new things that they did with the acceleration of the visual, and the fact that it's larger, the fact of what's coming with iOS 11 with the file system and all that, and then on top of that, everything that Procreate has teased on their Instagram account with what they're going to do with both iOS 11 and the new iPad Pro. It's all great reason to be creating art, I guess, in this way right now. It's really great. So my official, I'm not going to do like a video where I officially review the iPad Pro, the new iPad Pro. All I'm going to say is that it's absolutely awesome, and if you're a professional working artist, I think it's worth upgrading to the newest version. If you are more of a hobbyist, it's not absolutely necessary. I gave my old one to my wife. She's more of a hobbyist, and she absolutely loves just having that one. And so I think, though, if you're working professional and you're looking for sort of the best possible, to be honest, compared to like Cintiqs and laptops and all that shit, spending the $1,100 or whatever it is to sort of completely upgrade, I got a new pencil and all that kind of shit, it's worth it. So there you go, that's the official review. At this stage in the art, you'll see that I haven't really altered much. I did my rough sketch, and I'm keeping to it so far. So really all this is I'm just refining and cleaning up the lines and making sure that I'm trying my best to honor the energy, the original energy of the sketch. I don't know how many of you struggle with this, but I struggle a lot, and I think a number of artists that I know struggle with maintaining the energy of the rough sketch in the final lines. That's something that I always try to work at, and I try to be conscious of, and it doesn't always work out perfectly, but you know, try to do my best. I think that I was pretty successful with the hair on this one in terms of making sure that all of that energy is still in there, and the rest of this piece, I think, as a whole maintains the energy. pretty good compared to others that I've done. Now what you're looking at here is I decide that I want to really focus on the fact that this guy is like a corpse mage. He's more than a necromancer. Everything that he does is just about flesh and dead, and that's it. He doesn't deal with skeletons, he doesn't deal with, you know, blight, he doesn't deal with anything like that, something that's sort of linked naturally to a necromancer. So what I want to do is really just focus on dead stuff. Dead humans, dead flesh. So what we've got here is I thought it might be cool to do a staff that's just made of like all these hands sort of gripping each other and arms and stuff that goes up into the staff, into this lantern. And I had to start thinking of like, what am I going to do here? So I took the rough of that staff, I laid a rough on top of it of the hands grabbing each other, and now the stage that we're at here is me going in and just refining those lines and making sure that it's nice and clean and it makes sense. I want the shapes to be recognizable at first glance, that like, oh yeah, these are a lot of hands, but I'd like it to also be it takes some time to sort of look through it all and be like, oh, that's cool, that hand's grabbing that and that's doing that and all that. So I think that it's fairly successful in being recognizable as to what it is, but then there's also enough visual interest in there that you can sort of stare at it and really pull it apart. Now, as this progresses, I'm essentially just going in and I'm thinking about what all of these things might be. I basically just sort of go with all human hands. There's really nothing that you can say that's anything more than that. I do some chipped nails here and there to make sure that it looks like, you know, like it's been through some wear and tear. There's some like sort of disease on it. And then when we get to the lantern part, I put like some long fingernails, that type of thing. I didn't want to go too crazy because I didn't want anything to be too distracting. You know, if this were... Let's just go wild for a minute and say that this is a character that you can upgrade as equipment. Maybe you can get different weapons that are all just fused pieces of flesh, and maybe you defeat demons, and so you might get like a red hand, a bright red spiky hand or something like that. That would absolutely be something cool once you've established the base, and that's sort of what I consider this to be. This is sort of establishing the idea, and if in the middle of the staff there was just this like bright red hand, I would worry that maybe that would be the distracting element of it, and really I just want it focused on the fact that this guy is wielding a staff made of hands, basically. It's kind of a weird sentence. I don't think I've ever said a sentence quite like that. So now we're just adding, you know, this bone jutting out of the that particular arm. A lot of this is a lot of noodly work. I won't go completely silent here. I'll try to think of something else to talk about in the meantime, but that was sort of what this was. It was a lot of just sort of noodly work. Now, in order to make sure that I don't waste too much energy filling in too much that is going to get covered up, I go in and start putting his hands back in. All of this is separated quite a bit by layers. If I were going to name all the layers here, we've got just sort of the white background, then we've got the overall rough image, the rough sketch, then we've got the head all on a clean line layer, then we've got a new rough that is the rough staff, then we've got the clean line of the staff, and now we're looking at a clean line of the arm being put in. You can also see that I didn't want him to be in like a super natural natural pose. I wanted him to be kind of all over the place and a little awkward, but I felt that this wrist angle was just too much. It just didn't come off right, and you'll see me adjust that in a minute. For the most part, I'm just going in and laying in all the knuckles and the fingers and trying to make sure I'm guaranteeing that the hand has a proper grasp on all of the meat, and making sure that it actually feels like he's making contact with the thing that he's holding. And you'll see I'm adjusting a couple of things from the rough there. The thumb gets a little bit adjusted and some of the fingers get a little bit adjusted, but all in all, it pretty much is sticking to the original rough. So now I am turning back on I increased the opacity of some of those layers on the staff, and I'm going back to roughing in, doing a new rough for the other hand so that I can really lay out where the fingers are. Full disclosure, I'm not super happy with that particular hand, but you know, sometimes, you know, things aren't perfect, they're just done. So that's sort of where that hand ends up going for me personally. And then after I wrap up that hand, we go through and turn on the staff again, and then erase away everything that is blocked by the hands. now let's flip the staff back on, erase those lines, fill in some of the little gaps in there so that we make sure that it all sort of makes sense. And now we get back to the rest of the body. So now at this point, I don't know exactly what my layer stack was like, but it would be perfectly reasonable for me to take the hands from the dude and then all the hands that are part of the staff, merge that all into one thing. Started on that neck there, and now I jumped back over to the rest of the staff, trying to just finish it off. Sometimes, you know, you maybe get a little bit of, you're a little, I don't know, tired of working on one little area, so jump on to another area, get some of that energy back, and then jump back over again. So now we're working on the collar. That staff is completely done as far as the main part of the staff goes, but as you can see in the rough, I've got that lantern there that I still need to get to. But since I originally did the staff, I changed it to this hand staff, and so now that lantern doesn't really make a lot of sense. So we'll come back to that lantern in a minute, where I change sort of how I'm going to represent that to try and match the rest of the hand staff. Now I'm going through on the collar. Like I said, the collar is on its own layer. Oh, there we go. I jumped the arm over, so you can see the arm angle is completely changed now, and I reconciled the connection of the arm with the hand. And I'm working on that collar, which is all separate layers and stuff, which you saw a second ago. I erased away the neck and drew through the staff on that layer and then erased away. And now I'm trying to maintain some of the motion of his sleeve, and that's why we've got that, you know, sort of sweeping sleeve. And as I didn't include it in the rough, I'm going through and also making sure that the little notches in the sleeve are taken out, and there's little cuts here and there, and it's got the proper amount of wear and tear. So now we're adding these little stitches in order to try and add some more dimension and some more interest into his cloak. I think that maybe as this game may progress, this guy could potentially get... Oh, there we go on the neck. If you look at the neck right there, I toyed with the idea of maybe he hung himself at some point and then survived it, or that's part of becoming whatever the hell he is. And then I decided not to because it was just a little too distracting. But what I was saying about the stitches is maybe later on he would get a more advanced cloak, or maybe he wouldn't, or maybe, I don't know. So for now, I just wanted to keep him rather basic, and now that way all the interest would be on his face and his expression, and then his sort of like creepy staff, and then the lantern hanging, and that was going to be the bulk of where I was going to focus all of it. So now what you can see here is we've gotten to the lantern and reimagining the lantern. I figured that if we were going with this flesh hand thing, sure, it'd be kind of funny or cool or interesting to maybe have the whole thing end with a hand that's just sort of holding a lantern like a person would. But then I thought, that's not going to be interesting for this piece since it all goes off the screen. So let's just go like really sort of fucked up and have a human head that's been turned into a lantern. So I go with this thing where these like fingers that have these sort of like hooks on them, these sort of, you know, long nails are hooking into the cheeks of a jawless head, and then in that head is, you know, there's a candle stuck in it, and then there's wax pouring out of the mouth. That just all felt kind of awesome, and so doing my best to keep that still like sort of stylized and fun while also being a little bit gruesome, and have the actual head itself be like it's got this expression of like, I don't know, worry. Maybe he's worried that he's got a candle stuck in his head, but at the very least, like sort of maybe the last minutes of, you know, anguish or something before he died. Maybe he's not dead, who knows, maybe that's part of it. Maybe it's like Vampire Hunter D's hand and it talks to the guy every now and then, I don't know. But also something that's not really captured in this is I actually drew this right side up. So I just rotated the canvas and drew this whole section like that, and then flipped it back around to do the candle and the fingers hooked on. So like it's just going back and forth and trying to make sure that I'm doing it all in the right context so that I do it correctly. This was easily one of the most fun aspects of the whole thing. I actually love drawing sort of like disintegrated or destroyed anatomy. When I was doing a con once, I was a little bored at the con, and I just started doing all these heads where like they were getting sliced apart and damaged, but not in like a gross, gruesome way, just like in more of a geometric way, and it was really a lot of fun. I love doing that kind of stuff. It's just, for what I usually like drawing on a whole, it's not that practical. So whenever I get the opportunity to do something like this, where I'm trying to, you know, a tooth is missing and the jaw is missing and this is twisted and fucked up, and I'm trying to figure out how the mouth reconciles with these stretch things, it's just kind of fun to do something other than just a normal human head. So you can see here I'm roughing in all of this now because I've never drawn exactly that before, so trying to rough it in and figure out exactly how it works. That's all on its own layer. You can see these layers getting turned on and turned off. Basically I do the big rough, and then if I get to a section where I don't really know what that thing is supposed to look like, I will do a new sort of sub rough, I guess you could say, for that section, so that I can really feel it out and make sure that I'm doing it accurately instead of just relying on that sort of macro rough, I guess you could say. So now we're getting the big gloopy wax put in. Yeah, this was really fun to do. I think that if I continue to draw this character, I'm going to come up with more messed up fun things to do with human anatomy. Now the other thing that was really interesting once I put that flame in there is I knew I was going to try and capture some sort of interesting lighting, but I sort of deliberately am not doing much lighting in these pieces. I wanted to sort of embrace this look where it's almost like the characters are pseudo cell animated, and then they're against a more painterly world, but they're still really high detail. And I know that I don't really know if that's the way it's always going to be, but that's sort of what I'm trying to maintain right now. So I knew that I would eventually have to reconcile that idea of a singular light source, and how do I make that work if I'm not doing a shadow layer. I decided eventually to get rid of, obviously not do the failed hanging thing, and instead just put this tight belt around his neck. I like the idea of characters and things that are suffering. They embrace suffering, and they're constantly in anguish, because I think that's like super, super messed up, and I think that creates this, like, I don't know, this just like, it's not a world that I really identify with at all, and I think that that's what kind of makes it really crazy and cool. It's similar to that new game that's going to be coming out called Agony, where like everything's just really dark and heavy and just this unrelenting, immoral sadness. I think that that's really kind of, there's something alluring about it from a creative perspective. That's the same reason why I never really get into it, but I love the idea of something like Warhammer 40K, where it's just like, what's the most depressing thing you can think of? Now go even more depressing. Now even more depressing. Like I really like that idea. So, okay, so here I'm adding in the curls to his robe. I probably took like a day between when I was working on it before and when I came back to it. So even though these curls look nice, they're not very stylized. They don't have sort of the facets that the rest of it has. So I go back in and I erase certain sections. It's just that thing where sometimes you get out of sync with your drawing and you're like, oh right, shit, I need to add a little bit more flair to this section. So that's what I sort of just adjusted on that back area. And then I'm adding some more curls and some more damaged areas and just trying to sort of fill in the bottom of the piece, because I really like the idea of his lower half just sort of being voluminous and filling everything in, but it's also inspecific at the same time, or non-specific, not inspecific. So now we're just wrapping up that distant arm. Here I decided that even though I would eventually be able to separate it with color, I wanted to do something with line to separate the hand and the hand staff in his hand all from everything that's going on in the background. So I just add that little bit of a beefier outline around that part. And then go back in and wrap up some of the robe twists and tangles in the background. So this is a very long process for drawing. It really wasn't that long in reality. It's just the fact that the way Procreate records things. You know, they record every little thing. So like if I'm painting and I use a big brush and just cover a really large area, then that whole area gets filled in sort of like a big chunk. But if I'm doing a lot of little strokes in order to get a thicker line, then it records a lot more densely. It records so many little aspects of that. So that's what gets us this. So I want to do something similar with the last one, where I've got sort of like this brown, this, I guess, rusty sort of undercoating, and then I basically duplicate that and put a gray coating over that, and then that allows, because it's a messy brush, it allows some of that to come through. And now I'm using that as a bit of a color hold for the entire thing, and start with the biggest shape first, which is his robe. And now I'm essentially just flatting right now. I'm not doing really anything special in this phase, and I'm trying to decide on the colors as I go. So I knew I wanted him to be really gross looking, but did I really want him to be green, or did I want him to be more flesh colored and then just find like sort of a gross flesh? Obviously I go green, and then I block in the hair with black and then lighten that a little bit so that we can see some of the lines there. We added the dark around the eyes, but then we also add a little bit of pink around the eyelashes to make it look like maybe he's got a slight infection there around his eyes or something. You can see I put that little bit of like a warm blush around like the fingers and elbows and nose and stuff, but then I'll later go in and add a little bit more of a pink to that, just to make it look really kind of unsettling. For the skin, I just sort of lay like a standard Caucasian skin in at first, but then you can see that I desaturate it, and then I go through and I start mixing it up a little bit so that it looks like the skin came from like lots of different people, and then put the poisony sort of blight on the skin. It's sort of like what Beetlejuice has on his hairline, to be honest. And then lower the opacity on it and change the color of it a little bit. Now I'm going through and I add that little sort of purple around everything to make it all look like it's a little infected and like some blood is collecting in spots. Then we got of course the veins and the little holes in it showing through. I didn't really want the staff to be bloody because I wanted it to look like it was like that for a while. Blood's not too much of an aspect of this, and that's the vibe I'm sort of going for with the flesh and the skin and of the staff, and that's how I'm sort of representing it. Because of the style of coloring in this, in fact, the rest of this video is going to wrap up pretty quickly, because this is all just flatting. That's really how I did 90% of the coloring for this, is just flatting with a couple little gradients here and there to try and hint at some stuff. When we get to this candle here, you'll see, so that's all flatted. Let's just not talk about that. Then I go and I put this bright color for the flame, and then I just added a little bit of like a gradient light source right there, but then erased away like where the shadow would be, and that was the most for the lighting on that I did. But you'll see as it keeps going, I put like a couple little shadows here so that we can really separate out those shapes on the curls, and then I do some sort of vignetting across the entire thing, where right there where I'm darkening in all of that, then lowering the opacity of it. And then I actually, at the very end of this, I put like a layer over the entire thing where everything is getting slightly tinted blue, but then that spot where the candle is getting slightly tinted orange, and that's going to sort of drop in, and you'll see that sort of changes the dynamic of the entire piece. So now I'm putting in the rim light on the face. You see that got put in a second ago, and then I put it on the chain there, putting a little bit on the hand, trying to keep the rim lights to a minimum and just give a little bit of dimension, but I don't want to go too far, similar to the last one. I'm trying to keep some of those tricks down for this so that it doesn't get too noisy, too overdone. So now I'm just blocking in the hanging cages. I wanted to have an element similar to the village in the background of the other one, so he's in some sort of a place that's ill-defined, and it's got these cages hanging, so I blocked them in real quick, and now I'm just going through with black and making sure they have the right amount of detail. And then I add a secondary layer similar to the way the village was done, that's sort of the back of the cage on all of these. So you can see that right there. And then I'm just essentially going through these one by one and cleaning them up and adding some extra detail to them and adding the backing of the cage to each one. On this one that I'm working on right now in the back there, I add a little dude in there too that's just sort of chilling. Probably not enjoying himself, but He's just hanging around. So there we go, wrapping up that back left cage, putting some stuff flying around in the background. And then I believe about now, yep, there's the dude getting put into that back area. I add a little bit more darkening at the top just to try and really make it feel claustrophobic as a whole. And then a little bit of glow, but then you'll see right here at the end the layer gets dropped on it that really makes it feel right there, where it's really blue everywhere else and really warm just where that light is. And that's the piece. It's like I said, fairly simple. It was really more about restraint than anything else, and I really hope you guys dug it. So thanks for watching, and if you did enjoy it, please consider liking and subscribing, and I'll see you on the next one. If you're looking for me on the World Wide Web, these are the places where you can find me.